Our next and last speaker is Mr. Faustino Pinto. Faustino Pinto is the Vice National Coordinator of the Movimento da Reintegração das Pessoas Atingidas pela hanseníase, or Movement of Reintegration of Persons Affected by Hansen's Disease, Morhan. Faustino, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank the Lepers Mission and special Matthias Duke for inviting me to this important event and to talk about hot topic when it comes to Hansen's disease, but so little work on in fact, and what makes me most excited to talk about it is that I will be able to talk a lot more about what can really limit us in this very complex Hansen's disease world. And I say that because some people think that a person affected by Hansen's disease disabilities are only of physical nature, but in fact, it's much broader than that. Actually, this conversation goes beyond physical disabilities. It's important to say that the term disabilities does not define who we are or what really happens in our lives. Of course, there are limitations to certain daily tasks that need an unusual effort for us to live a productive life. But we must rethink the way we see the people affected. We must focus on the individual as a whole and not just on their physical impairments. Look at people and see the other existing forms of exclusion and limitation, such as financial, intellectual, linguistic, technological, accessibility, and so on. Hansen's disease imposes barriers that sometimes seem insurmountable. This is more because of the way we are seeing that how we see ourselves. And within this biomedical model of relationship between health professionals and the people affected by Hansen's disease, there is a very structural problem. I mean, the focus of health professionals and government entities is on the disease. That is, they focus on the disease and not on the individual affected by it. We will have and will produce a legion of people with major physical limitation to live in society. By the way, I would like to make a criticism that I hope will be seen as a constructive by ILAP's corporate and institutional environment. I'm talking about the language barrier. There are people around the world that are fully capable to contribute to this debate. There is more to this world than Faustino, Arthur Custódio, Amar, Matthias Duke, Paula Brandão, Ratina, and so on. Most people affected by Hansen's disease did not have and do not have access to social opportunities and formal education that would allow them to speak a second language, which does not mean that they are unable to contribute to these debates and struggle. They end up being limited by the language barrier imposed by the institution that coordinate these events. Just imagine that in countries and continents as large in population numbers, rich in culture and popular knowledge as Brazil, India, and Africa, it would be wonderful to have more people with us, fighting, have their say of the facts, bringing their life story and struggle to the world's light. ILAP's institutional official language is English, but nothing prevents the introduction of other languages. I myself was glad when French was introduced. For this universe to remain plural, we need to include Portuguese, Hindi, and other languages that are necessary for a better understanding of whatever is spoken and discussed in this space of debate and construction based on lesson learned. I make this appeal to ILAB to make translators available, to make events more inclusive and accessible for people affected by Hansen disease worldwide. We need social inclusion rather than exclusion. The Morhan movement for the reintegration of people affected by Hansen disease has a great history of fight for human rights, inclusion, accessibility, and especially enjoying the attention of the governmental political system to the issues of limitation imposed by the disease and by the governmental and political system. This is why we have already intervened in several moments of our country's history. I will now share with you some of these battles. In 1995, together with other institutions, the movement asked the federal government to change the term from leprosy to Hansen disease. The bill was signed by the then President Fernando Henrique Cardoso, becoming a historic landmark in the fight against social exclusion. The use of the disease-related term leprosy and its linguistic derivatives was prohibited in our government layers, both in official documents or speech. Morhan is in several important councils for the fight for collective health in our country, for the elderly, adolescents, women, health, social assistance. In the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, we occupy this space at the national, state, and municipality nearly nationwide. I will talk a little about Law 11,520 through the words of my national coordinator, Arthur Custódio. It was 26 years of struggle, of conquests, some small and others more significant ones, but all with equal importance in the fight against Hansen disease. Morhan, throughout its history, has strengthened itself and overcome the obstacle and moved forward in the fight against Hansen disease and still stick to its main purpose, the fight against prejudice and stigma. These are factors that exist today due to the prophylaxis and treatment adopted until 1986 to control the disease, which consisted exclusively of taking every person diagnosed with Hansen disease at the time known as leprosy, to compensate isolation in a cruel and inhuman way. The movement fought then for the recognition by the state of the error and damage caused to these people. A long battle that found victory in 2007 through a bill sponsored by Senator Tião Viana, together with Morhan. President Lula then said a provisional measure which enacted Law 11,520 of September 18, 2007, guarantee every person that was forcibly isolated by the state in a leprosarium as isolation, institution, or none, a lifetime indemnity pension. This law is a milestone in the fight against the disease in Brazil and in the world. Only Japan had done the same thing. And it shows us that our fight has results. It makes it possible for at least 10,000 people who are victims of this cruelty by the state to be minimally compensated for the suffering imposed on them. Special pension, a great achievement. The law is more comprehensive and always carry action for people with disabilities. Both Morhan and its Justice and Human Rights Access Network on January 17, 2022, had a great victory in the fight for human rights. Federal Judge Fábio Teneblanc of the 3rd Federal Court of Rio de Janeiro delivered the order of Morhan's actions against President Bolsonaro for using the term leprosy, meaning of Hansen disease, with a favorable decision for our movement. The case began on December 22 through Carlos Nicodemus, Morhan Justice and Human Rights Access Network, volunteer lawyer. Today's order determines that the Union and its representatives, including the President of the Republic, Jair Bolsonaro, refrain from using such terms and its derivatives under penalty of a daily fine of 50,000 Brazilian reais. It was necessary to go to court to seek to guarantee a ban that is already provided for by law. When the president mentions leprosy in an official speech, he violates law 9010 of 1995. He also violates the dignity of people affected by Hansen disease by using a prejudicial language in our country. If the presidency of our country does not care about the legislation of Brazil itself, then civil society needs to act firmly and attentively in defense of what has already been conquered as a human right. Since its foundation, Morhan has been involved in the inclusion of people affected by Hansen disease. We do not only see the disease, a bacillus or physical impairments. We see limitations and discrimination imposed by the disease and the system. It's about inclusion, accessibility, and respect for human rights that we fight daily and tirelessly. Thank you very much.